Nicholas Steele had spent his entire life making decisions without looking back. He built an empire, walked away from distractions, and never questioned whether he had made the right choices. But all it took was one glance across a crowded room, one pair of familiar blue eyes staring back at him from a child's face, for his carefully controlled world to come crashing down. Nicholas Steele had built his life on discipline, control, and an unwavering focus on success. He had no patience for distractions, no tolerance for unpredictability. His company was his empire, his legacy, and nothing, was going to jeopardize that. So when Kate told him she was pregnant, his first reaction wasn't excitement. It wasn't fear. It was cold, calculated certainty. "We can't," he said, his voice devoid of emotion as he poured himself a drink. Kate stood frozen in the middle of their penthouse, her hands protectively resting on her stomach. "What do you mean, we can't?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Nicholas exhaled sharply and turned to face her. "You know how I feel about this. I told you from the beginning, I don't want children." Her lips parted slightly as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I thought maybe things would change when it actually happened, that you'd feel differently when you knew there was a life growing inside me." His jaw tightened. "I told you the truth. My answer hasn't changed." Kate's fingers curled into fists. "So what? You want me to get rid of it?" Nicholas looked away, setting his glass down on the bar. He didn't answer. Kate's breath hitched. "Oh my God." He forced himself to meet her gaze. "Kate, my work, my life doesn't have room for this. You knew what you were signing up for when you married me." Her face paled. "I didn't marry a machine, Nicholas. I married a man. A man I loved. A man I thought loved me." Something sharp twisted in his chest, but he ignored it. Love was irrelevant. Feelings were distractions. This wasn't about emotion, it was about logic, about the reality of the life he had built. "I can't be a father," he said firmly. "I won't." Kate took a step back as if the force of his words had physically struck her. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're just walking away." "I'm not the one leaving," Nicholas said evenly. Kate stared at him for a long moment, then nodded, more to herself than to him. "I can't believe I ever thought you were capable of love." Her voice was quiet, but the pain behind it was deafening. She turned and walked toward the door, her movement slow but purposeful. Nicholas expected her to stop, to turn around, to ask him one last time to reconsider. But she didn't. She opened the door, stepped out, and let it close behind her without hesitation. Nicholas stood there, staring at the empty space where she had just been. He told himself he had done the right thing, that she would be better off without him, that he would be better off without her. By morning, he had convinced himself he had no regrets. 6 years later, he would learn how wrong he had been. 6 years had passed, and Nicholas Steele had never once looked back. He had buried himself in work, expanded his empire, and cemented his name as one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. He told himself that he had made the right choice, that his life was exactly as it should be, uncomplicated, focused, free of distractions. But as he stood in the middle of the grand ballroom at an exclusive charity gala, sipping his drink and making polite conversation with people he barely cared about, his carefully constructed world came to a sudden crashing halt. He saw her before she saw him. Kate. She was standing on the far side of the room, looking just as breathtaking as the last time he had seen her. Time had done nothing to dull her beauty, but there was something different about her now. Her posture was more guarded, her expression more composed, her presence quieter but no less striking. She wasn't the woman who had once stood in their penthouse, pleading with him to reconsider. She had changed. And then he saw the girl beside her. A small child, no older than 6, with chestnut brown hair tied into 2 neat pigtails. She wore a pale blue dress and held Kate's hand, her tiny fingers curled around her mother's with easy familiarity. But it wasn't the girl's presence that sent a sharp jolt through Nicholas's chest. It was her eyes, big, blue, familiar. His. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The world around him faded into background noise, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the distant notes of a string quartet, all of it became meaningless. His pulse pounded in his ears as he stared at the little girl, his mind racing to process what was right in front of him. Kate turned, her gaze sweeping across the room. The moment their eyes met, something flickered across her face, not shock, not panic, not guilt, just quiet, unreadable indifference. She had known he was here. She had walked into this event knowing he might be in the same room, and yet she didn't look surprised. That hurt more than he expected. Before he could think, before he could stop himself, Nicholas started moving toward her. He didn't know what he was going to say. He didn't even know what he wanted. But every logical thought vanished under the weight of one undeniable truth: he had a daughter, and he had never even known she existed. Nicholas moved through the room with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained unreadable. His movements were controlled. People glanced at him as he passed, recognizing him, expecting the usual nod of acknowledgement or firm handshake. He ignored them all. His focus was locked on the woman standing just a few feet away, and the child at her side, who had his eyes. Kate didn't move. She didn't step back, didn't shield the girl, didn't rush to explain herself. She simply met his gaze with quiet defiance, as if daring him to speak first. Nicholas stopped directly in front of them. His breath steady despite the storm brewing inside him, his eyes flickered down to the little girl, who was watching him with curious caution. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable, the same blue eyes, the same sharp features. She was his. His throat tightened, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Kate. She lifted her chin slightly. Nicholas's silence stretched between them. He wasn't sure how to start. He had never been at a loss for words before, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. He turned his attention to the girl, who clung to Kate's hand but didn't hide behind her. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Kate's fingers tightened slightly around the child's hand, but she didn't hesitate. "Amelia." The name settled into his chest like a weight, like something that had always belonged there but had been kept from him. He looked at the girl again, studying her, memorizing every detail of her face, her stance, the way she was watching him. She wasn't afraid of him. She didn't know who he was. He forced his gaze back to Kate. "You didn't tell me." A flicker of emotion crossed her face, gone before he could name it. "You didn't want children," she said, her voice calm but firm. Nicholas exhaled sharply. "That was 6 years ago." Kate's expression didn't waver. "And nothing has changed, has it?" Everything had changed. He had spent years convincing himself that he had made the right decision, that he wasn't meant to be a father, that he had spared them both from a life he couldn't have given them. But standing here now, looking at the child he never knew existed, none of those reasons mattered anymore. His voice was low, controlled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kate's jaw tightened. "Because I wasn't going to beg you to love her." The words cut deep, sharper than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Amelia tugged on Kate's hand. "Mommy, who is he?" Kate inhaled slowly, her expression softening as she looked down at her daughter. Nicholas felt his entire world shift in that moment. This was his daughter, and she had no idea who he was. Kate looked back at him for a split second. Something uncertain flickered in her gaze. Then, she turned to Amelia and said, "Just someone Mommy used to know." Nicholas felt the impact of those words like a punch to the gut. Kate nodded politely, as if they were nothing more than distant acquaintances. Then, she turned, leading Amelia away. He should have let them go. But he couldn't. Not this time. Not again. Nicholas stood frozen as he watched Kate walk away, Amelia's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The words echoed in his head, louder than the music playing in the background, louder than the conversations happening around him. Just someone Mommy used to know. The finality of it stung in a way he hadn't expected. He had built his entire life on control, on making decisions and never looking back. But as he stood there watching his daughter disappear into the crowd, he realized this was something he could never walk away from. Without another thought, he moved. His steps were steady, his face unreadable, but inside, a storm raged. He maneuvered through the crowded ballroom until he caught up with them near the exit. Kate had just reached for her coat when she noticed him standing behind her. She sighed, her shoulders tensing as she turned to face him. "Nicholas, don't do this." His jaw tightened. "Don't do what?" "Don't act like you suddenly care," she said, keeping her voice low. His eyes flickered to Amelia, who was standing quietly, glancing between them with innocent curiosity. He looked back at Kate, his voice controlled but firm. "You don't get to decide that." Kate let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I don't? Really? Because 6 years ago, you made your decision. You told me exactly what you wanted, and it wasn't this." Nicholas exhaled sharply. "I didn't know she existed." Kate's expression turned cold. "And whose fault is that?" He clenched his jaw. "You never gave me the chance." She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether or not it was even worth arguing. Then, she sighed and turned to Amelia. "Sweetheart, can you give Mommy a moment?" Amelia nodded and wandered a few steps away, distracted by a nearby display of paintings. Kate turned back to Nicholas, her eyes sharp. "What do you want?" He didn't hesitate. "To know her." Kate let out a slow breath. "It's not that simple." "It is," he countered. "I have a daughter. You've kept her from me for 6 years. I have a right to know her." Kate's jaw tightened. "And what happens when you realize that fatherhood doesn't fit into your perfect, structured life? What happens when you get tired of playing dad and decide it's easier to walk away?" His stomach twisted. "That's not going to happen." She let out a bitter chuckle. "You say that now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I am not that man anymore, Kate." She studied him carefully, searching for any sign of dishonesty. "Even if I believe that, it's not just about you. Amelia doesn't know you. You can't just drop into her life and expect her to accept you overnight." "I don't expect that," he admitted. "But I deserve a chance." Kate looked away for a moment, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. Finally, she turned back to him, her voice quieter. "If I let you meet her, you don't get to hurt her. Do you understand that? You don't get to walk in, make her believe she matters to you, and then leave when it becomes inconvenient." Nicholas swallowed, his throat tight. "I would never do that." She searched his face, her defenses still up. But something in her expression softened just slightly. "Fine. You want to meet her? We'll start slow." Relief crashed over him, but he didn't let it show. He simply nodded. Kate glanced at Amelia, then back at him. "Tomorrow. After school." Nicholas nodded again. "I'll be there." Kate exhaled and turned toward Amelia, calling her back over. Nicholas watched as the little girl skipped toward them, oblivious to the weight of the conversation that had just taken place. Kate took her hand and looked at Nicholas one last time. "Don't make me regret this." Then she walked away, leaving him standing there with the single most important promise he had ever made. Nicholas arrived at the small cafe 15 minutes early. He had never been nervous before a meeting in his life. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, faced ruthless competitors, and built an empire with nothing but his own determination. But none of that compared to this. He sat at a table by the window, his hands resting on the polished wooden surface. The coffee in front of him remained untouched. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to feel. He had spent 6 years believing he didn't want children. Now, in a matter of hours, that belief had shattered. The door chimed, and his heart pounded. He turned his head just in time to see Kate stepping inside. She looked different than she had the night before, more casual, more like the woman he had once known. She wore jeans and a soft sweater, her long brown hair falling loosely over her shoulders. But his eyes weren't on her. They were on Amelia. The little girl held her mother's hand, her other clutching a small stuffed rabbit. She looked around the cafe with quiet curiosity, her bright blue eyes scanning the room until they landed on him. Nicholas stood. Kate approached the table, her expression unreadable. "We're here," she said softly. He nodded, forcing himself to breathe. Kate looked down at Amelia. "Sweetheart, this is Nicholas." Amelia tilted her head slightly. "The man from last night?" Nicholas almost smiled at her observation. She was perceptive. Kate hesitated before kneeling beside her daughter. "He's someone very special." Amelia's small fingers tightened around her rabbit. "How?" Kate glanced at Nicholas, then back at her daughter. "We'll talk about that soon, okay?" Amelia studied him for a moment before nodding. Kate guided her to the seat across from him, and Nicholas sat down as well. The silence stretched. He didn't know how to talk to a child. He had never tried. But this was his child. That thought alone made his chest tighten. Kate cleared her throat. "Do you want some hot chocolate, Em?" Amelia nodded, and Kate signaled for the waiter. Nicholas knew this was his moment. He leaned slightly forward, his voice softer than usual. "I like your rabbit." Amelia blinked at him. "Her name is Rosie." "Rosie." He let the name settle on his tongue. "She looks very well loved." Amelia stroked the bunny's ear. "She's my favorite." Nicholas hesitated. "How long have you had her?" Amelia thought for a moment, then held up 3 fingers. "Since I was 3. Nicholas nodded, as if this was the most important piece of information he had ever received. Kate watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. The waiter arrived with the hot chocolate, setting the small mug in front of Amelia. She wrapped her hands around it, taking a tiny sip before looking up at him again. "Mommy said you wanted to see me." Nicholas swallowed. "I did." "Why?" He had never been unprepared for a question in his life. But this, he had no perfect answer. He could only be honest. "Because I didn't know you existed," he said, his voice lower than before. "And now that I do, I don't want to miss another day." Amelia studied him, her blue eyes piercing in a way that reminded him of himself. She seemed to consider his words carefully, as if deciding whether or not to believe him. Kate reached across the table, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind Amelia's ear. "You don't have to rush, sweetheart. This is just a meeting." Amelia nodded slowly before turning back to Nicholas. "Do you like cake?" she blinked. "Cake?" she nodded. "Seriously, Mommy says people talk better when they eat cake." A small, unexpected laugh rumbled in his chest. "Your mother is very wise." Kate rolled her eyes, but he caught the flicker of amusement in them. Amelia smiled slightly. "Then we should get some cake." Nicholas nodded. "I think that's an excellent idea." Kate signaled for the waiter again, and as Amelia carefully examined the dessert menu, Nicholas realized something. This wasn't just the first meeting, this was the first step. Nicholas had never realized how much his life could change in a single moment. But sitting across from Amelia as she carefully sliced her cake into small, precise bites, he understood that everything was different now. She was so small, yet so composed. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words were measured and thoughtful. He could see traces of Kate in her patience, her quiet strength. But there was also something undeniably his. It was in the way she observed everything, in the way she studied him with an intensity far beyond her years. Kate remained quiet for the most part, letting Amelia take the lead. Nicholas appreciated that. He didn't need Kate to guide him through this, he needed to find his own way. Amelia took another bite of cake, then set down her fork. "Do you work a lot?" Nicholas straightened slightly. "Yes, I do." She nodded. "Mommy works a lot too. She says working is important, but not more important than people." Nicholas felt the weight of those words settle heavily in his chest. He had spent his entire life putting work above everything else, and because of that, he had missed this. "I think your mother is right," he said, his voice quieter than before. Amelia studied him carefully. "So, if you work a lot, why did you want to meet me?" Nicholas exhaled. He had spent his entire career knowing the right things to say, but none of those skills applied here. "Because I should have met you a long time ago," he admitted. Amelia tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "Did you not know about me?" He shook his head. "No." Her small fingers curled around the edge of her plate. "Would you have wanted to know?" The question cut through him in a way nothing ever had. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I would have wanted to know more than anything." Amelia didn't respond right away. She took another bite of cake, her eyes flickering between him and her mother. Kate said nothing, letting her daughter process at her own pace. After a long pause, Amelia finally spoke. "Do you like parks?" Nicholas blinked at the unexpected question. "Parks?" She nodded. "The one by our house has swings and a big slide. Do you like those?" He had never thought about it. He hadn't set foot in a park since he was a child. "I haven't been to one in a long time," he admitted. Amelia rested her chin on her hand, looking thoughtful. "I think you should try it. Maybe you'll like it again." Nicholas wasn't sure if she was testing him or simply stating a fact, but something about the way she said it made him feel like she was offering him something, a chance. Kate finally spoke. "We usually go to the park on Saturdays." Nicholas looked at her, then back at Amelia. "Then I'd like to go with you." Amelia didn't smile, but something in her expression softened. "Okay." Kate met his gaze, something unreadable in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Nicholas nodded. "I want to be there." Amelia finished the last bite of her cake, then wiped her hands on her napkin. "Okay, but you have to go down the slide at least once." Nicholas almost laughed. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals and stood in front of the most powerful people in the world without flinching. And yet, he was fairly certain that going down a slide with his daughter would be the most terrifying challenge of his life. But he didn't hesitate. "If that's the rule, then I guess I'll have to do it." Amelia finally smiled, small but real. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Steele felt like he had done something right. Nicholas arrived at the park on Saturday morning, earlier than he needed to. He wasn't used to waiting for people. In his world, others waited for him. But this wasn't business, this wasn't a meeting he could dictate on his terms. This was something far more delicate, something he had no experience with. The park was small but well kept, a stretch of green space in the middle of the city. A playground stood at its center, with swings, slides, and climbing structures that already had a few children running around. He scanned the area, his gaze catching on a wooden bench near the entrance. He walked over and sat down, hands resting on his knees, heart beating harder than he cared to admit. A few minutes later, he spotted them, Kate and Amelia walking side by side. The little girl was wearing a bright yellow jacket, her hair in 2 braids today instead of pigtails. She held Kate's hand, her other arm wrapped tightly around her stuffed rabbit. Nicholas had never paid much attention to small details before, but now he found himself noticing everything. The way Amelia's legs swung slightly as she walked. The way Kate leaned down to whisper something to her. The way Amelia's face lit up for just a second before she turned her attention toward him. Kate saw him first. She met his gaze, gave a small nod, then looked down at Amelia and said something he couldn't hear. The little girl hesitated for only a moment before releasing her mother's hand and walking toward him. Nicholas stood, unsure of what to do with his hands. Amelia stopped a few feet away, tilting her head as she looked up at him. "You came," she said. "I told you I would," Nicholas replied. Amelia looked thoughtful for a moment, then pointed toward the playground. "Are you ready?" He glanced at the slides, the swings, and the parents sitting nearby, watching their children. "For what?" She gave him a look that made it clear he should already know. "The slide," Nicholas let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I see." Amelia reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. It was the first time she had touched him, and he felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name. Kate followed a few steps behind as Amelia led him toward the playground. Nicholas hadn't been on one of these in decades, but today none of that mattered. Today, he was here for her. Amelia stopped at the bottom of the biggest slide and looked up at him. "You have to go first." Nicholas glanced at Kate, who was leaning against a nearby railing with her arms crossed, an amused expression on her face. He turned back to Amelia and nodded. "All right." He climbed the short ladder, feeling slightly ridiculous. But when he reached the top and looked down at Amelia waiting for him expectantly, something inside him eased. He let himself go, sliding down with a surprising rush of movement and landing smoothly at the bottom. Amelia clapped. "You did it." Nicholas dusted off his hands and gave her a nod. "Your turn." Amelia grinned and climbed up the ladder. She slid down effortlessly, her laughter ringing out as she landed beside him. Nicholas found himself smiling, a real, unguarded smile he hadn't worn in years. For the next hour, he followed her lead. They went on the swings, climbed the jungle gym, and even played a game of tag that left him more out of breath than he cared to admit. Through it all, Kate watched from a short distance, her expression softer than before. Eventually, Amelia ran over to Kate and plopped onto the bench beside her. Nicholas walked over, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside him. Amelia looked up at him. "That was fun," she said. He sat down beside her. "Yeah, it was." She took a sip from the water bottle Kate handed her, then turned to face him fully. "Are you coming next Saturday?" Nicholas felt the weight of Kate's gaze on him. He met Amelia's eyes and nodded. "If you want me to." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Okay." Kate didn't say anything, but when she met his gaze, something shifted. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it wasn't doubt anymore either. And for now, that was enough. Nicholas had never thought that something as simple as a Saturday at the park could change everything, but it did. It became a routine. Every weekend, he met Kate and Amelia at the same place. At first, it was just the park. Then it was ice cream after. Then it was walks through the city. Afternoons spent in bookstores where Amelia would carefully choose a new story to take home. He learned things about her that no business deal, no amount of logic, could have prepared him for. She didn't like chocolate ice cream but loved vanilla. She hated when her socks didn't match. She liked puzzles, especially the ones with 1,000 tiny pieces. She could tell when he was uncomfortable, and when she noticed, she would change the subject without making it obvious. She was smart, observant, more like him than he had expected, but she was also kind. The way she looked at the world was softer than his, less cynical. She hadn't been hardened by disappointment or ambition. She still saw life as something full of possibilities. Every time she reached for his hand without hesitation, every time she laughed at something silly he said, he felt like he was being pulled into that world with her. Kate was slower to trust. She was polite but cautious. She never let him take Amelia anywhere alone. She never asked for anything from him, never assumed he would stay. She watched him carefully, waiting for him to prove that this wasn't temporary, that he wouldn't disappear when things got difficult. Nicholas didn't blame her. One evening, after dropping them off at their apartment, he stood outside the building longer than he should have. Kate had already taken Amelia inside, but the door hadn't closed completely. She stepped back outside, arms crossed as she looked up at him. "Are you coming in?" He hesitated. She had never invited him inside before. He followed her in, glancing around the small but warm apartment. It was nothing like the penthouse they had once shared. Nothing like the cold, sleek spaces he was used to. There were drawings on the fridge, a small bookshelf overflowing with children's books, a blanket draped over the couch that looked like it had been hand-knitted. It wasn't perfect, but it was a home. Kate motioned for him to sit. He did, watching as she leaned against the counter. "She talks about you," Kate said after a moment. Nicholas looked up. "Amelia?" Kate nodded. "Not in big ways, just little things. She mentions things you say, the way you drink your coffee, how serious you look when she's explaining something to you." He didn't know what to say to that. Kate exhaled. "She likes you." He felt his chest tighten. "I like her too." Kate studied him. "Then what are you going to do about it?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She looked down for a second, then back at him. "Nicholas, I can't let you be in her life if this is temporary. She's a kid. She won't understand if one day you just stop showing up." He leaned forward slightly. "I wouldn't do that." Kate held his gaze. "Wouldn't you?" His stomach twisted. He knew why she doubted him. He had walked away once before. He had told her he wasn't meant for this, that he didn't want a family. He had given her no reason to believe that he had changed. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. Kate exhaled, as if she wanted to believe him but wasn't sure if she could. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. "I don't just want to be someone she sees on weekends. I want to be her father." Kate blinked, her fingers tightening on the edge of the counter. "That's not something you can just decide, Nicholas." "I know," he admitted. "But I want to earn it." Kate didn't answer right away. Then slowly, she sat down across from him. "That's going to take time." He nodded. "I have time." Kate studied him for a long moment, then she nodded just slightly. "Okay." Nicholas exhaled, feeling something inside him settle. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a perfect ending. But it was the beginning of something real. The ending of this story carries a powerful message about growth, second chances, and the importance of facing the consequences of one's past actions. Nicholas, a man who once dismissed the idea of fatherhood and rejected the very concept of a family, ultimately shows that change is possible. His journey from indifference to active participation in Amelia's life is both touching and redemptive. Kate's cautious yet open approach to letting Nicholas into Amelia's life reflects the complexity of rebuilding trust. She isn't naive, she's protective but also willing to give him a chance, just as he is giving himself a chance to be the father he never thought he could be. The way Nicholas proves his commitment, not with grand gestures but with consistent, quiet action, makes the ending feel earned and real. It's a story about learning to prioritize what truly matters. The ending isn't just about Nicholas finding a daughter or rekindling a bond with Kate. It's about realizing that relationships, family, and love require patience, consistency, and vulnerability. Nicholas doesn't just walk into their lives, he slowly, deliberately earns his place in their world, proving that growth is not just about saying the right things but about showing up every day. It's a hopeful reminder that no matter how much time has passed or how many mistakes have been made, there's always room to change, to grow, and to make things right.